The following organizations have provided funding for this Into the Outdoors television series.
Whoa, Zach! Don't forget your PFD.
Ugh, kids these days with all their gadgets.
PFDs aren't just some tiny gadgets, Zach. This could actually save your life.
How could it save my life? I don't even know what a PFD is.
A PFD is a personal flotation device.
What the? How did you?
You may also know it as a life jacket or a life vest.
Well, if it makes you happy, Phoebe, I'll wear the PFD, but I don't think I'll need it.
Well, that's actually the point, Zach. You'll never know when you need your PFD because they're meant to save you in case of an accident.
Oh, yeah, you've got a pretty good point. So how exactly would a PFD save someone's life?
That's a pretty big question. Do you know the answer? If not, don't worry. Luckily, I know someone who can answer it for us. Sorry, Zach, but our day on the lake is going to have to wait. We need to learn more about how our safety equipment works before we head
into the outdoors.
Grab your gear and let's explore as we discover the wild outdoors. Science, discovery, it's what we do. You can make our earth a bright and better place by joining us in this wide open space. Into the outdoors.
Phoebe, I thought you said we needed to understand how our PFDs work before we got in the water. What are we doing at a pool?
We're here to learn more about our life jacks by doing some tests here at the pool.
How are we going to do that?
Remember how I know someone who can help us? Meet Catherine Martin. Catherine is an engineering leader at the UL. UL stands for Underwriters Laboratories. That's where they test all the PFDs in the country to make sure they meet the U.S. Coast Guard regulations. Right, Catherine?
We offer an approval. It's a UL approval, and we work with the Coast Guard. So when you get a life jacket approved at UL, you're also getting a U.S. Coast Guard approval.
Oh, see this label here? That means it was tested and approved at the UL lab.
Oh, hey, mine has that too. But Phoebe, if these were already approved by professionals, why are we testing them now?
Oh, well, we're not real safety scientists, and this isn't a real testing lab. So our tests are just for our education and understanding. That's why Catherine is here to walk us through the process.
Now I'm getting intrigued. How about you? How would you test a product that's meant to save your life? Let's find out how the professionals do it.
So we have really two paths when it comes to testing for a life jacket. Testing in what we call our mechanical lab and testing at our pools.
So what kinds of mechanical testing do you do?
We hang a weight off of the life jacket and we try to see, will the zipper stay zipped? Do the buckles stay buckled? Does something break? We will even run a full life jacket through a flame to see what happens.
I had no idea there was so much testing involved in PFDs. I guess when it comes to a device that's made to save your life, you want to be thorough with your testing. So Catherine, what makes a PFD capable of saving a life?
They got to get enough buoyancy, something that will lift you up out of the water, that'll float you up.
But what makes a PFD float?
Oh, I know the answer to that. Density has everything to do with the difference between floating and sinking. Density refers to the particles that make up an object and how close they are to each other in relation to the object's size. For example, this torpedo is much heavier than this ball, despite them being about the same size. That means this ball is less dense than the diving block. For an object to float in water, the object needs to be less dense than the water, otherwise referred to as having positive buoyancy.
So if it sinks, does that mean it has negative buoyancy?
That's correct. An object can have positive buoyancy, meaning it floats, negative buoyancy, meaning it sinks, or even neutral buoyancy. Neutral buoyancy means an object doesn't float or sink. It just sort of hovers between the surface of the water and the bottom of the pool. Let's test our two objects. The torpedo sank, so is it more or less dense than the water?
The torpedo is more dense than the water?
Which means it has what kind of buoyancy?
Negative buoyancy.
Right. Let's try the ball. The ball floats, so is it more or less dense than the water?
The ball is less dense than the water.
That means it has what kind of buoyancy?
Positive buoyancy? So, wait, that's why PFDs float, because the foam is less dense than water.
Wow, Zach, you catch on quick. You're right. A lot of PFDs are made with foam because foam floats. But in the past, they were made with cork and canvas, or sometimes even wood. In fact, the very first personal flotation devices were made with animal skins that were inflated with air like a balloon. Assyrian soldiers used these PFDs to cross moats.
Wow, I never would have thought to try something like that. It's really interesting to see where PFDs started and how far they've come. So Catherine, are people still looking to improve the way PFDs work?
Most of the manufacturers really try to make a vest that is a better fit so that they're more comfortable and they look nice.
I've seen PFDs that come in a bunch of shapes, sizes, and designs. How many different types of PFDs are there?
We categorize them by like type 1s, type 2s, type 3s, type 4s. There's even type 5s and level 70s. And some of those can be foam filled, some of those can be inflatable, and some of those are foam and inflatable.
That makes sense. Different types of watercraft and activities require different types of PFDs. It's important to remember that not all PFDs are life jackets. A life jacket is only a life jacket if it keeps a mobile person's face out of the water. Only a couple of PFDs do that, but Catherine can explain more. Can you tell us a bit more about each type of PFD?
We have a type 1. These are very big, very bulky. They're really designed for use on like rough and remote waters.
An offshore PFD, such as a Type 1 or level 150, is something you might see on a big vessel that's out in the middle of the ocean, like a large cruise ship or a fishing boat. These PFDs are much bigger and are designed to turn the user face up in the water in case they were unconscious. They also keep you out of the water a bit more, which would keep a swimmer warmer because it might be a while before you're rescued.
Then we have type 2, and these are intended for calm inland waters. Rescue is going to be close at hand. They're less bulky than a type 1.
But most importantly, Type 2s and level 100s are still designed to turn the user face up in case they were unconscious.
Then there's type 3s, and these are usually worn by people who are on recreational boats. And these are definitely designed to help people that have rescue close at hand.
The Type 3 and level 70s are referred to as buoyancy aids. These are the types you'll likely be using when you go out on the water for recreational activities, if you are a confident swimmer.
We also have what's called the type 4, which are going to be throwables. So that's going to be something like your boat cushion.
Type 4s are an example of a PFD that would not be considered a life jacket because it can't keep an immobilized person's face out of the water. But these are great for giving a swimmer a little extra buoyancy in addition to the PFD they're already wearing.
We have type 5s, which are typically intended for people with a certain level of training.
Type 5 PFDs are uniquely designed for a very specific use and are only intended for that purpose.
That was a lot of information. So how do you test to make sure that one type of PFD can work for a variety of people and sizes?
We have to have a certain number of people come in and actually test them and jump in our pool. Because PFDs can vary so much based on how they fit on somebody, it's important to make sure that if it says it fits this size person, it really does fit this size person.
That's right. My PFD isn't the right size for Phoebe, and Phoebe's PFD might not be the right size for you. Everyone's body is different, so the professionals need to make sure there's one type of PFD that works for everyone.
I think we have a pretty strong understanding now of how PFDs work and how to pick the right one for ourselves. I think it's time we start testing them out in action. Before we can get in the pool, we have to start with the first test Catherine mentioned, the donning test. This is where we have to put on the PFD as fast as we can while on dry land. This test is to make sure the PFD is easy to get on quickly and properly. How much time do you give people to put on the PFDs?
We give them 60 seconds.
All right, ready, Zach? Time starts now.
Looks like both of our PFDs passed the donning test. We were both under 60 seconds by a lot.
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward getting all the buckles and straps secured while standing on dry land. But it probably wouldn't be as easy if we were swimming in the water or on a moving boat, which is why you should always put on your PFD before going out on the water. All right, now that our PFDs are on and secured, we can get in the water and start testing.
Did you say get in the water? You don't have to tell me twice!
That's not exactly how the test is supposed to go. I'll show you. The water entry test is to make sure the PFD does not come off or injure the user when they enter the water. To test this, volunteers are asked to enter the water from 3 different heights: 1 meter, 3 meters, and 4.5 meters. Since we aren't in a professional testing lab, we will only be using the 1 meter high board for our safety. We also have a trained lifeguard with us. Do not try this at home. For this test, we have to stand on the board and then step off into the water with our hands above our head. If the PFD stays in place and doesn't slip off, then it passes the water entry test.
That was fun. What's next?
Next, we would do a series of flotation stability tests. These tests are to make sure the PFD is keeping the user's airways above water, so they don't have to use any energy keeping their head above water in case they need rescuing. Remember, keeping an immobile person's face suspended upright and out of the water is what makes a life jacket a life jacket. Since we don't have a real safety scientist here with us today, I'll be doing some mock measuring for you. For these tests, Zach will float on his back while I take measurements. The Freeboard Test measures the distance from the corner of the user's mouth to the surface of the water. The face plane test measures the amount of head support. The torso test measures the body angle of the subject in the water. Next is the turning test. This test checks that it is easy enough for a user to flip themselves from a face-down position to an upright position. Users should be able to do this in less than 5 seconds. For the placement security test, we will each do 3 jumping jacks in the water to see if the PFD moves from where it's supposed to be. Because life jackets can shift on the body while you're moving around in the water, we need to test to make sure that the PFD never moves into a position that might make breathing or seeing more difficult. If you ever fell overboard and were stuck out in the water for a long period of time, you could be at risk for hypothermia. The heat escape lessening position, otherwise known as HELP, helps prevent heat from leaving your body. During the HELP test, volunteers are asked to assume the HELP position to make sure that the PFD does not stop them from getting into this position. Lastly, volunteers will be asked to perform the water emergence test, where the PFD is tested to make sure water can drain quickly from it to allow the user to pull themselves out of the water more easily.
Well, our PFDs passed every test, so I guess that means they fit us well and they are working properly. But I wonder, is there still a chance they might not work in case of an emergency? What are some reasons a U.S. Coast Guard approved PFD might not work properly? Let's see what Catherine can tell us.
Some people, will leave their life jackets out on a boat. They can get a lot of wear from the sun. They can get wear and tear from use. And if you start losing the foam pieces, there's some sort of damage, it won't close, it won't stay on. That will definitely make it where it won't work right. So then you're not going to float.
Oh, gotcha. So new U.S. Coast Guard PFDs should be in proper working order, but always make sure to do a look over before buying, just in case. And it's important to keep your PFD in good condition. That means taking care of it, like properly storing your PFD out of the sun, and always making sure to regularly check your PFD for damage before using it.
Right. It is also important to make sure that your PFD is the right one for you, is working properly, and is not damaged. But the best thing to do is make sure that you're wearing your PFD.
Even good swimmers can get knocked overboard, and if you're injured, your swimming skills don't mean anything. And if you have the PFD on, it's going to float you.
Yeah, during our testing today, we had 60 seconds to put on our PFDs, but that was on dry land. If we were swimming in the water trying to put on our PFDs, that'd be a lot harder, and you won't always have that opportunity either.
If you're ejected from the boat suddenly, you won't have time to grab your PFD. Even worse, the boat might hit you, and then you'd be injured in the water without a PFD. After all, the 2 most common causes of drowning are falling off the boat and falling off the boat without wearing a life jacket.
And I bet a lot of these victims thought, I'll just put on my PFD if I need it.
But the problem with that is you don't know when you're going to need it. Boating accidents happen so quickly, and you often don't have time to react. When you choose not to wear your PFD on a boat, you're taking a big risk.
If an accident happens, you may not have time really to get the PFD on. You may not have time to get it on properly.
That's right. You never know what could happen, whether you're on a boat, personal watercraft, or even a paddleboard. So it's always important to have your PFD on and secure whenever you're out on the water.
And remember, the best PFD is the one you're wearing. A PFD can't save your life if you aren't wearing it in the first place. We've learned all about how PFDs work and how they can save our lives. But I think it's time for us to talk to somebody who knows firsthand how important PFDs really are. Thanks, Catherine. Come on, Zach, let's go.
Now that we've seen PFDs being tested in a lab, we wanted to see what they can mean in real-life boating accidents. We're here with Hunter Bland, and as you'll see shortly, he has quite the story to tell. Hi, Hunter. Thanks for talking to us today.
Thanks so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to share my story.
So when did this accident happen?
So on January 14th, 2017, I had just launched for a bass fishing tournament on Lake Seminole out of Bainbridge, Georgia. We went through boat check, which is where they check our engine cutoff device. They check that our life jackets are on and fully fastened. We had passed boat check completely fine. We idled out to the river where we got on plane in our boat on the Flint River, and I was about 2 miles down the river. I go to cross a boat wake, and my hydraulic steering comes apart after I cross that wake. Me and my partner Connor were violently ejected when the boat does a 360, and we were both pitched out of the side of the boat.
That's really scary, and it's hard to watch, too.
When I was ejected from the boat, I was actually trapped underneath the boat for, it felt like 45 minutes, but it was really probably only 4 to 5 seconds. And my partner Connor saw me kick out from underneath the boat, and he immediately swam over to me and pulled the cord on my life jacket.
So your PFD was able to keep you from drowning that day because of your friend?
My partner Connor's hydrostatic inflatable PFD immediately went off, and it actually rotated his head upright. So there wasn't any unwanted water immersion, and he was actually up and aware. So when my manual obviously did not inflate, the minute I came out from underneath the boat, his head was up, he was aware of what was going on, and he immediately saw me when I came out from underneath the boat, and he was able to swim over to me and pull the cord on my life jacket so my life jacket inflated. So what I actually learned from that is that a manual PFD, there's applications for it, which may be paddling on a kayak or something like that. But in a bass boat and a tournament fishing situation, a manual PFD for me in that accident was not the best choice at all.
Hunter, if you don't mind me asking, what could you have possibly done differently that day to prevent the accident from happening in the first place?
There's nothing that I really could have done differently because I did everything correctly in terms of safe boating. A lot of people think that I actually wrecked from crossing over the boat wake, but actually when you slow that video down, what actually happens is I'm completely across that boat wake and my hydraulic steering comes apart at that time. From what we know, we lost a nut on the right side of that hydraulic steering, and we do a violent 360, which is where my partner Connor and I are completely ejected. I was wearing my engine cutoff device. I had my PFD on and fully fastened, and so did my partner. The only thing that I really would change is to make sure I was wearing either a foam PFD or a hydrostatic PFD like I have on here, because that could have truly changed the outcome if I would have been trapped underneath the boat.
Could you possibly let me, Phoebe, and other people know what to be prepared for in case we ever find ourselves in an accident like this?
Boat ejections are one of the biggest causes for fatalities on the water. A lot of times because people aren't utilizing an engine cutoff device, or they're not utilizing proper PFDs or a PFD at all. And so when they go overboard, they're drowning or they're being hit by a propeller strike, things like that. So an engine cutoff device and a PFD on board for all passengers on the boat. If anything was to happen, it greatly increases your chances of survival. So make sure that you're always prepared next time you hit the lake, whether you're kayaking, paddleboarding, or even in a tournament scenario like I was.
Thank you so much for coming out and talking with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Hunter.
Hunter had some great tips for staying safe out on the water, and clearly he knows what he's talking about. How about you? How do you plan on staying safe next time you're out on the water?
Come with us as we hit the lake and test out what we've learned about PFDs. Today, we're enjoying the lake with friends by using personal watercraft.
So what exactly is a personal watercraft? Is it like a kayak or a paddleboard?
Actually, it's more like a personal mini boat. A personal watercraft is a small jet-powered craft that's meant for individual use out on the water. Unlike a boat where you typically sit, the user stands or sits on it. You might also know them as water scooters, wave runners, or jet skis.
Oh yeah, I have heard of them before, but I've never actually ridden one.
Don't talk it till you try it.
Okay, so what do I need to know about driving a PWC?
Hey, you need to be at least 14 years old to drive.
Oh man. Well, can I still ride it if I'm not 14?
Yeah, definitely, Phoebe. That's what I'll be doing as well. While I'm old enough to drive, I've never actually driven one before, so I'll be riding with someone who's licensed. There are some other regulations that vary based on the state or body of water you're riding in. For example, some states may require you to take a course before you drive a PWC. Think about it. If boats are kind of like the cars of the water, then personal watercraft are like the motorcycles of the road. And you wouldn't want someone who doesn't know what they're doing riding a motorcycle around, would you?
Woohoo! Look at me go! I'm on a motorcycle!
Another common rule is that you aren't allowed to ride at night. So it's really important to make sure that you follow the regulations that apply to where you are.
Okay, so what else do I need to know?
PWCs are a lot smaller than boats, and it's easy to fall off if you're going too fast. That's why it's always important to make sure to wear a PFD when driving or riding a PWC.
So I know that we talked about the different types of PFDs with Catherine at the pool, but I'm having a hard time remembering which type of PFD that we should wear while riding a PWC.
Ooh, quiz time! I'll get you started. So, we're on a lake, which means we're pretty close to shore, and rescue is going to be close at hand. And riding a PWC would be considered a type of recreational activity.
Rescue close at hand, recreational use.
Do you know?
Oh, is it a type 3 PFD?
Yeah, that's right. A Type 3 PFD, or a level 70 buoyancy aid, is what most people should wear while using a PWC out on the water.
However, you might want something more heavy duty if you aren't a great swimmer, if the water is really choppy, or if you're really far offshore.
That's where the US Coast Guard recommends a Type 1, level 150, or a Type 2, level 100 PFD to better handle those conditions. All right, Phoebe, let's do one last safety check before we get out on the water. Do you have any loose clothing or anything that could get caught in the pump of the PWC?
All clear.
PFDs?
Secure.
All right, we're good to go out on the water. Hey, Gary. Hey, Sam.
Hi, you two. How's
Hey,
it
Joe,
going?
how's it going?
Ready to go out on the water?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, well, Phoebe, you're going to be riding with me today, and then Zach, you get to ride with Gary.
All right, let's get this thing in the water. Let's get the PWC going.
Oh, hey, Sam, is that an engine cutoff device?
Yeah, this is engine cutoff switch, or ECOS.
Cool. My friend Hunter told us about those. So, can you make sure it's working properly?
Yeah, definitely. All right, looks like it's working properly. Okay, hold on to the back of my straps, Phoebe, and we'll get going here.
Okay, like this?
Yep, just like that.
Who's ready for a lunch break? Let's head back to shore.
Thanks so much for having us out on the water with you today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, you bet.
You guys seem to know a lot about what you're doing. How long have you all been using personal watercraft?
I've been using personal watercraft for about 20 years now.
Well, fairly recently, because Gary invited me over to his place to use his.
So what do you think makes PWC so much fun, especially for kids?
They're really maneuverable and they're really easy to handle.
What are some of the dangers associated with personal watercraft?
Probably one of the biggest dangers of personal watercraft is excessive speed. They're extremely fast. In addition to that, if you take a corner too quickly, you can roll the watercraft or fly off the watercraft. But that's also why it's extremely important to have your ECOS switch attached to the personal watercraft so that the engine does kill in the event that something does happen. The other danger about taking corners too quickly in the maneuverability of these crafts is that you're not the only one out on the lake. There's other boats around that are driving. If you do turn quickly, you might inadvertently turn into the path of another boat that might not be able to get out of your way as quickly as you could. So you have to be extremely cautious about what you're doing.
So what are some things that we and our viewers at home can do to be safe while using personal watercraft?
The best things that we can do is always wear a U.S. Coast Guard approved PFD. We can avoid excessive speed, and we can make sure that we're careful about making short turns and potentially cutting off other watercraft that might not be as maneuverable as we are.
Once again, thank you so much for talking with me today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, are you up for another lap around the lake?
Absolutely, let's go.
Awesome. Phoebe and I learned so much about PFDs today. We learned how they work, how they're tested, why they're important, and how to have fun while wearing them.
I sure felt a lot safer on the water knowing how my PFD works.
Yeah, me too. It was super cool knowing how they're tested too.
Yeah, and hearing a real life story about how important they really are.
Right. Hopefully you learned something too, so you can make sure that you're wearing the PFD that's right for you and the activity you're doing next time you head into the outdoors.
Grab your gear and let's explore as we discover the wild outdoors. Science, discovery, it's what we do. You can make our Earth a bright and better place by joining us in this wide open space into the outdoors.
The following organizations have provided funding for this Into the Outdoors television series.